In the fire of trials, we're refined, our bonds of brotherhood forever aligned. Through every test of faith, we stand as one. Forged in the furnace, our hearts are one. All right, what's up, brothers? We're back at it for episode 8, Expectations Within Friendships. We're still in season 1 talking about the issue of male loneliness and why men need friends. Before we get started, man, how y'all doing, man?
Doing great.
Good. Blessed to be here.
Same here, man. Doing pretty good. All my girls are gone, man. They went to the Yes weekend. And so I'm flying solo, kind of. Me and old Marshall are the only guys.
What kind of what breed dog do you have?
He's a Maltese and a miniature poodle.
Okay, so you got a smaller animal?
Yeah. I don't want a big dog lumbering around the house.
Hey, yeah, man, they say that position for you, man. You got to be the only big dog walking around the house.
Only one big dog in the
house. Only one big dog in the house.
Brother.
And all I'm going to say, Stephen, to that is remember that clip about that guy who told his dog who was the dog in his house.
I know.
Well, man, we're talking about friendships and the expectations within friendships, and I'm glad and happy and honored to share a friendship with you, brothers, and I think this is going to be a good episode and one that a lot of guys can relate to. Before we jump into the question, I just want to give a little bit of background research from Mayo Clinic, and we got some other stuff. A book called Platonic by Dr. Marissa Franco, who did a lot of research in the area of friendships and just social connections in general. And from Mayo Clinic, they actually start off by saying friendships can have a big effect on your health and well-being, but it's not always easy to make and keep friends, which I think we've discussed in other episodes leading up to this one. And they also talk about understanding the importance of social connection in our lives and knowing exactly what we can do to build and fuel lasting friendships. What does the Bible say about the role of friends in our lives, and how can we apply those principles to our relationship?
There's a lot of principles that you'll find relative to friendship in the Bible, and I think all of them involve a mutual expression. So it's not a one-sided thing. And so the first passage that jumps into my mind, which is probably the same for you guys, in the King James, Proverbs 18:24, where it reads, "A man that has friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother." I like that King James rendering there, as you know, it demonstrates that there's kind of a mutual thing. I can't expect a person to be my friend and extend certain privileges to me in that friendship, but then I don't reciprocate. So one of the first principles is just it's a two-way street.
You see it in today's world too, that a lot of friendship seems to be one-sided. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I've actually had the privilege of experiencing this myself and also talking to guys who experienced that idea of, man, I feel like I'm always giving. I'm always extending an invitation to go out to eat or something like that. And it's never really extended to me. So those are some expectations, at least that we see from the forefront. It's like what I extend to you is you're expecting to get some of that back, that mutual love and things like that.
So my mind went in the same direction, Stephen. And my first thought when I was looking at the question, I said, well, the scriptures say a lot about friendship. And there were two other passages that I was thinking of. So you mentioned Proverbs 18:24. But of course, my mind did go to the Proverbs. And so I thought about Proverbs 17:17. Friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. And then, of course, a few episodes back, we talked about Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. And so, like you said, Stephen, friendship is a mutual exchange. The two persons in a friendship or involved in that friendship should be receiving something. But when you consider the Proverbs, we see that a friend is one who holds their friend accountable. A friend is one who helps their other friend from becoming dull and worn by the weight of life. A friend is one who's peaceable and can be approached. And a friend is one who loves at all times, whether it's a time of adversity or whether it's a time of peace, right? Their love for their friend is not contingent upon the circumstances. Proverbs 17:17 says that love is constant, right? And as a matter of fact, when adversity comes, again, it says there that it's as if that he's born for adversity. So I know that could speak specifically to a family member, but that's not just a family member. That's also a friend who has demonstrated those characteristics or those traits. That's sticking close like a brother, right? They're there and they'll say, hey, listen, I'll face whatever you have to face with you. So you know you don't have to face it alone again, as if they were born for the express purpose of helping you with that adversity. And so as far as applying those principles, it's been said many times, take a genuine interest in people's lives, practice listening, show yourself to be trustworthy, make yourself available, and be consistent.
Well, all the Proverbs ones, those are the first things that came to my mind. But then there's another passage, and it ended up being one of my favorites about friendship. I took those questions, Daniel, that you sent us about this podcast, and I'm preaching it tomorrow. So I'm ready for this. I won't preach the whole sermon. There's Ecclesiastes, and we probably all read this one too, chapter 4, starting with verse 9. It says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him. A 3-4 cord is not quickly broken. The value of a friend is when I'm down, he picks me up. When he's down, I pick him up. And where the world might get me when I'm by myself, if I've got somebody else in my corner, he can help me defeat the world. He can help me defeat Satan. He can help me defeat the difficulties that come in my life. I think that's a beautiful description of what friendship means if we have that type of friend.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And so we were talking about the idea of mutual sharing in a friendship. I wanted to, from the basis of that, I just wanted to address that particular characteristic. When we talk about mutual sharing in a friendship, is it always the case that you would give equally to each other, or would that sort of be one friend would give a little bit more, the other friend will receive a little bit less? Can we speak to that? How is that? How can we go about that issue of mutual sharing?
Well, I was going to say, the short answer is no. I mean, it's like that in several relationships. And I think sometimes that's why people find themselves exhausted with certain friendships or trying to forge and create new friendships. It's this idea of everything that I'm giving or invested into the relationship, it has to be reciprocated at 100%. That's not realistic. You said it a few episodes ago that when it comes to friendship, we have this Hollywood perspective, right? So we watch what we've seen and we say to ourselves, oh, it has to be this way. I have to talk to this person every day. This person has to pick up the phone every time I call. This person needs to put their life on hold every time I have a need. And while we do want our friends to be reliable, while we do need to maintain communication, it's just not practical. I think about the love that we have in Christ. And, you ask it that way. Is that love always 100% reciprocated in the church, brothers?
No.
Absolutely not. And so, should we walk around, believe with this chip on our shoulder, saying because people don't invest what I invest, it must mean they don't care about me the way that I care about them. That's a very slippery slope. That's dangerous. And so,
yeah,
I think understanding that, can help us with that.
Ron kind of said it, no relationship. It doesn't matter if it's a friendship, a marriage, a business partnership, or otherwise. No relationship will be 100% reciprocal. At all. And that is a unrealistic expectation. We really set ourselves up for failure. Brian and I have talked about that aspect recently. I had a friendship that while I was not expecting it to be apple and apple in terms of what we did, I call you, you got to call me. I give you $1, you got to give me $1. I didn't have that expectation, but I did have an expectation that you would at least be a friend like I'm a friend. So whatever I'm extending to you, whatever courtesies or respect, those sorts of things would be reciprocated in the same way. So you'll be a friend like I'm a friend. And while I thought that was fair, it didn't end up being the case. And so the friendship actually ended up deteriorating and is not intact anymore. And it was hard for me to kind of figure that out, what just happened, and that sort of a thing. But it just helped me to see that not every friendship is going to have equal parts and equal sides on all sides. There's sometimes, even like in a relationship, with your spouse, just because I buy Carlisa some flowers doesn't mean the next time she's going to buy me a ribeye. There may be years, like when, for example, she was finishing up her master's degree. And so for a long time, she just had to do her work. I would come home and sit on the couch next to her. We couldn't talk a bunch because she was busy trying to get her work done. Then the roles switched. When I was in preaching school, she couldn't have the same sort of attention I would give her otherwise. So I was kind of focused in school. And but now, things are a little bit more balanced, but we had a time where he was more free than I was more free than, And so relationships are always a give and take, ebb and flow. And if we love the individual enough, then we will be able to deal with, whatever comes in a relationship. If you don't call me every week, if I send you a birthday card, you don't send me one. It's okay, but maybe that's not your language, so to speak. And so I have to respect who you are and allow you to be who you are in the friendship and let that be enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a struggle that I want to talk about, man. I think there's a lot of people when you look, it's almost like how we read scripture sometimes, right? We look we read scripture through 21st century lenses. And the very way that we read scripture in the West may differ from how others read it in the East, and even differs from how people read it in times before us. And so even in a relationship, I'm looking at you, expecting you to be just like me. I'm expecting you to behave like me, think like me, respond like me. And there's an issue when you want someone to be exactly like you, because then you're really in a relationship with yourself. Then at that point, you're not really expecting any uniqueness in the relationship. And I wanted to address that a little bit after we do this.
Even in our best relationships, my wife's my best friend. I think we all could probably say that. But as Stephen said, there's times when it goes up, back and forth, back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, constantly throughout the year. I farmed for several years, and in the spring and in the fall, it was all her at the house, basically. But now she runs a trophy shop, and in the summers, it's all me, cooking and all of these things. And neither one of us thinks anything about it. Now,
Right.
what would happen if it was always just me and it never ebbed and flowed? That's where marriages suffer. That's where friendships suffer, because, my marriage, I would like to think I would always, even if it was always all me, that I would stick it out. But man, that would be tough. But a friendship, if it's always me, I can let that go a little bit easier, or a lot easier than I can a marriage. And so if you're not getting that reciprocal, your needs met when you need it, then that's not a very fulfilling friendship. It says, I think somebody already talked about it there in Proverbs 17, friend loves at all time and a brother is born for adversity. You might have a lot more adversity in your life than me, and it might be 90% where I'm helping you through adversity. But man, when I have that 10% time, I would expect my brother to be there, because
Right.
that 10% of time, a true friend would be there. And when it's not, then not really a friendship. It's a lot more shallow than that.
Well, I was going to say, too, I think for the people, then you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but, for the people that we would bestow that title upon friend, we can at least say, yes, when my 10% comes around, that friend is there for me. Yes, as I reflect, it can be exhausting that, okay, hey, listen, I give 9%, they give 10%, but aren't we thankful for the 10%? And so that's what I was going to add. And, Stephen, it's not my quote. I'm actually quoting Stephen from a few episodes ago. Be thankful for our relationships. Each relationship is different. Each relationship is unique, and be thankful for that. Not all friendships are at the same level. And that can be a common, or unrealistic expectation that we have of friendship, is that every friendship has to be the same.
Yeah.
Everyone is not. You brothers right here, this panel of hosts, you guys have a higher tier of trust from me. You guys are in upper stratosphere. You understand what I'm saying? But that, I'm going to be honest and say, I can't say that of all my friendships, but that does not mean that I'm not thankful for them. And it does not mean that I have nothing to glean from those friendships. And so we should understand that too.
Absolutely.
Can I just ask this, I guess, or throw this out here for us to consider? When you're the friend that does the 90, it can be more challenging to receive the help at the 10. So if you're constantly the one giving the help, when you need the 10, we have to be humble and allow that other friend to give that 10.
What they have.
Yeah, because it can be the case that sometimes I'm so used to giving, I'm so used to being the one with the advice, the wisdom, the money, whatever it is. And then once the other side, it can appear to be a weaker position to have to receive. And it can offend the other friend to say, well, no, I don't need your help because you're only the 10% man. But let me do it, I'm the 90% man. If you're lacking that 10%, when you need it, it's important. And so, there's a level of humility even necessary within the friendship to demonstrate, even though you do only provide maybe this aspect, it's still important and it's still needful. And I still appreciate it. So we have to, in as much as we have to be willing to shoulder the 90, we have to be also willing to be humble and receive the 10.
Right, I agree. I'll make a comparison to Tyler Perry's movie, Why Did I Get Married? Both, in fact, with Janet Jackson, she was the friend with these ladies, and she was always the one teaching and explaining and trying to help them get their marriages back on track. When you look behind the curtain, her marriages was in shambles, and it's like every time her friends would try to extend help to her,
she rejected it.
Yeah, she was rejected every time, and they were like, "Let us help you. You help us all the time." And even though people, I don't think about it, that's how resentment happens. That's how bitterness happens. And I wanted to dig into that part a little bit because, as Stephen mentioned, since we're talking about unrealistic expectations in friendship, expecting someone to give the way that you give, or expecting to be the one who can't receive from the other party within the relationship, both can, again, begin to generate bitterness. So I just wanted to look into the idea of bitterness real quick. With Esau and his father, Genesis 27:34, and when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry. And I pointed out that you can almost see like that seed of bitterness had been in Esau, and it was sort of lying dormant until now. Like some member of the family, some friend or something triggered this bitterness within Esau, causing it to germinate, if you were to think about it in a seed. And you have to ask the question then, like, what triggered the seed of bitterness in Esau? Well, you have to consider the germination of a plant seed. That germination of the plant seed was initiated when it absorbed water. And in the same sense, Esau, the germination of that bitter seed was initiated when he absorbed hurt. And so if you think about it and compare it to a seed, a plant seed, when it absorbed water, it began to grow. It was lying dormant, but now it's starting to grow, the process of growth. The bitter seed, man, when it absorbed hurt, and sometimes that hurt that we absorb from other people, they don't even know they hurt us, right? And most of the time, if we're the ones shouldering the 90% and we expect that person's 10% not to mean much, and we reject it all the time, now you feel overworked, you feel burned out, overwhelmed, and it's all because you made the decision to reject it yourself. So I just want to speak to that a little bit. When we're talking about unrealistic expectations of friendships, how detrimental is bitterness and resentment as a result of that?
What we're talking about right now is speaking to me, because, at 10%, I'm about the worst person to let people know I need a 10% right now. And probably all of us are like that, which makes us good givers. But that 10%, and we do this in all aspects of our lives, with our wives, with our children. I expect you to read my mind and know when I need that 10%. You can't do that. My wife can't do that. My friends can't do that. My children can't do that. Unless I verbalize a need, nobody will ever know I have that need. Mm-hmm. But then what happens is we sit there and get in our head, well, Ron didn't call me, Steve didn't call me, Daniel didn't call me, my wife, doesn't even realize that there's something going on. And so I'm building this battle plan in my mind. All these people don't care. And they have no clue. They don't even know that I'm maybe going through this. It's not their fault. It's mine. And I told you I farmed for several years, and this goes to every aspect of life. If a 2-person job can be done by myself, I'm going to try to do it myself, which was dumb, and sometimes we approach that in life. If I can do it by myself, I'm going to do it by myself. Well, the fact is, there's some things I cannot do by myself. And that bitterness that arises really is not because my friends don't care. It's because they don't know that I have that need. And so we go through these scenarios in our mind. And something maybe that small grows into something huge, all because it's me. And then what do I start doing? I start pushing my friends away. I start pushing my wife away, and I'm worse than I was before. I'm alone in my own head. And that's
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, you mentioned, Esau's account there, and his bitter cry, man. I was gonna say, sometimes the bitterness or the hurt that is being experienced is caused by ourselves. And that's what I get when I read his situation. Why is he crying with a bitter cry? Well, think about it. He's been supplanted twice. First, you gave up your birthright, right? Focusing on the temporal and not recognizing the spiritual. And now here your father, whom, from what I get, looked at you as a favorite son, has given this special blessing to your brother. So it's like he kind of brought those situations on himself. I was writing down a quote, man, that I'd seen in reference to, bitterness and feeling like, nobody knows what I'm going through and I expect them to know. And the quote goes like this: emotional immaturity expects people to know. What does that mean? It expects people to know what's on our mind, know our struggles, know our difficulty, and just know what we need them to do to help us through that difficult time. But then the quote finishes by saying, or ends by saying, but emotional maturity desires to communicate. Isn't that simple? And so you start thinking about that. You're like, yeah, well, that's very telling. There are a lot of emotionally immature people out here expecting other people to be mind readers. And so really it's a pride issue. Can I humble self? Can I be honest? Can I take myself out of being the center of the universe? And that's another thing. We think the world sometimes revolves around us, and it's like, well, wait a minute. How could they know? I never told them, so yeah, that's all I have. And I'll turn it over. I'll yield to Stephen.
Thinking about that 90 and 10 of the various Bible interactions, one that came to mind for me was Saul and David. Saul became embittered with David, and David had done nothing to him. And it seems like it was one of those things where Saul could do whatever he wanted to do. I can do because I'm the king. I've got plenty I can do. But then when David wins a battle, which should have honored the king, he's unable to kind of process that. And there's some other context, of course, that's in there. It's just one of those things that we have to be humble enough to accept the help when it comes and celebrate it for what it is. But then there's also something that you said that really prompted a thought with me. You said, there's a 2-person job that I feel that I can do myself, and I just do it myself because it seems more efficient. And I agree with you because I'm the same way. It's just like, hey, man, I can do it. I can knock it out. And I don't know what that is that prompts me to think that. But just kind of mulling that over with the biblical context, is that the most effective thing? Wouldn't the more effective thing be to go and grab a brother or sister who we can maybe share some fellowship together? We can mutually grow together and do that together. Wouldn't that be the more efficient or effective biblical thing?
Yeah.
And so, doing things together strengthens relationships. I'm thinking about Ephesians. As y'all know, that's my favorite book in the Bible. And twice in that twice in that book, once in chapter 2 and then once in chapter 4, he uses this illustration of a house and the believers being part of this house. And, you start putting those bricks together, you start putting the wood together, you start putting a house together. It all mutually strengthens and holds up each other, and so, while Daniel, you could have done this podcast by yourself, but it edifies the other 3 of us because you included us in it. And so, I'm happy to be a part of it. Not so much that I have, this great depth of wisdom to pour out, but that I know that I get stronger when I kind of link arm in arm with the rest of you guys and we push forward. Kind of like the passage that you mentioned, Brother Mark, about a 3-string chord. When we come together, as Rob would say, one can get taken over easy, but that's a big breakfast when you try to take all 4 of us.
right.
And so when you put us all together, we're much stronger. And so while you could accomplish the goal, the podcast, with one, it's better with the 4. So, but look, I'm preaching it, saying it, but it's not easy because like Mark, I'm like, hey man, I can do this. And I don't know if it's a pride thing where I say, hey, I can look back and say, hey, man, I accomplished it. Good job, Stephen. Or if it's a thing, I don't trust somebody to do it as well as I would do it. Or if it's a time thing, well, they don't care. They don't want to help. I don't want to bother anybody. Whatever the reason, sometimes it just comes up, I'll just do it myself, when in fact it could be better, more effective to just bring in somebody with me.
If for nothing else, just for the relationship building itself, because we went to rake some leaves, I think about 2-3 years ago. And it wasn't, of course, what were we meeting there for? To rake leaves, but it wasn't about raking leaves. It was about fostering authentic relationship. And I think my dad did that a lot growing up. I'll be honest, I didn't see it all the time when I was a teenager and even younger. Like I was like, man, this is pointless. I hated fishing, man. I'm sorry, Steve. I know you like fishing. But I'm telling you, man, I used to hate sitting out there fishing.
I don't like fishing.
Oh, you don't? Okay, cool. I was just making sure. Like,
I like to eat fish.
Well, good. We're in the same boat, brother. I'm telling you, I could not stand fishing. My dad used to have us out there in the bank, and we'll go to all these spots. And even now, when he came up for my graduation this past May, the first thing he said, "Oh, I want to go fishing." But now that I'm a little bit older, a little bit more mature, I realize it's not about fishing. It's about the relationship. It's about fostering and building a strong connection between each other. But I just wanted to mention something real quick. There's a book, man, that we've been studying for a little while.
Yeah, man, I love that.
Dude, one of the best books I've read. It's entitled Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. And I think this book came out in the 90s originally, but they have a chapter in their book entitled Boundaries and Your Friends. And it's so, like, they give these various conflicts and they put it in scenarios and just illustrate why they're so detrimental to a relationship. And the first one that I started thinking about was, I'm gonna mention all of them, but conflict number one, compliant and compliant. So you have two individuals who are in a relationship, a friendship, and they both struggle to say no to each other. And so they find themselves always fighting. They're going back and forth. They're trying to figure out. It's almost like this. If you had to illustrate it in this way, to go, hey, I can get up and grab you a cup of water. Oh no, I got it. That's okay. You sit down. No, I can go do that for you. Oh no, I'm gonna go grab it. So you have these two people. They're fighting to do something for each other. And then conflict two, he mentions an aggressive controller. So you can almost see who's going to be taken advantage of there. The aggressive controller. The compliant feels intimidated and inferior in the relationship. The aggressive controller feels irritated at being pestered by the compliant. So in other words, since the compliant is usually unhappy in this relationship, he or she is the one who needs to take action. So we're talking about, if you feel a certain way, if you feel that resentment or bitterness, then usually it's some of your own doing, right? And it's not to say that your feelings are not valid. They are, but you have to be the one to set the boundaries. You have to be the one to speak up, to advocate for yourself. And so when we talk about bitterness and we talk about unrealistic expectations in friendship, I have to take a step back and say, okay, why don't I want, if I'm the one who's shouldering 90%, why don't I want help from the 10%? Do I feel like I always have to be in the superior position? Do I feel like I always have to be in the teaching role? Can I not be taught? Right? And that's why I love hearing other preachers. I'm like, man, it's refreshing to hear other preachers preach to you. I'm like, even as a personal trainer, it's refreshing to hear other trainers, to see them in action, to see how they would go about doing a certain protocol, to see what I can take from them. And so that ebb and flow, I have to figure out, why is it that I want it to be a certain type of way all the time, especially when I'm down? When I'm down, am I not willing to receive help from someone else? And if not, why not? And so we got the unrealistic expectations out the way, I believe. Let's talk about the realistic expectations. So what are some realistic expectations we should have within friendship?
One is honesty. Honesty is huge, right? I was thinking about Proverbs 27:5-6, where it says their open rebuke is better than love carefully concealed, and faithful are the wounds of a friend. And so you think about those wounds that a friend may have to dish out sometimes. Hey, listen, sometimes a friend has to be honest, right? And honesty can hurt, but I need somebody that's going to be honest. Right after honesty, I would say respect, empathy, and understanding, and consistency. And I don't think any of those things are too much to ask from a friend, or to give trying to be a friend to someone else.
I think Ron talked about some of the ones I was going to hit on as well. To me, a friend is one who I know and trust to have my best interest in heart. There in the Psalm 55, what makes friendship, only the people you love the most can hurt you the most. A stranger says something about me, that's not going to ruin my day. I'll be over it by lunchtime, if it happens in the morning. But I think, again, this starts with us. This is the kind of friend I need to be. Psalm 55, verse 12, for it is not an enemy who reproaches me, then I could bear it. Nor is it one who hates me, who has exalted himself against me, then I could hide from him. But it was you, a man my equal, my companion and my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together and walked to the house of God in the throng. Be the friend that can be trusted and who I can know, man, there's not a thing I can't go to him about. There's not a thing that I can't pour out to him that I know it's just going to be him and me, and it's not going to go any further. I found this quote too. It's not in the Bible, but it's a good one. A friend is one who does his knocking before he enters instead of after he leaves. A friend is one who does his knocking before he enters rather than after he leaves. In other words, and this is a big one. It's just you and me. No one else is going to hear about this. Have that trust. And if somebody can't trust me with their needs, then I can't be a friend to them. Mm-hmm. So adversity and all of that, but also, and I told you I'm preaching on this tomorrow, so you're getting point 3 right now. You guys, I know, are familiar with Jephthah's vow. He was wanting help to defeat the Ammonites, I believe, and he made that vow to God. Whoever walks through the door next, I'll sacrifice, and it happens to be his virgin daughter. Mm-hmm. Well, I found this in preparing for this, and I absolutely loved it. In Judges chapter 11, his daughter comes in and gets this news. Hey, I made this vow before God. I've got to keep it, which we can talk about another time, but I've got to keep it. No, you didn't, but he's going to keep it. And so he tells her, I've got to sacrifice. I've got to sacrifice you. Imagine getting that news that your dad has to sacrifice you because he made this foolish vow before God. And then listen to what she says. Then she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Let me alone for 2 months that I may go and wander in the mountains and bewail my virginity. And then listen to it. My friends and I. So she said, go. And he sent her away for 2 months. And she went with her friends and bewailed her virginity on the mountains. Who'd she want there with her? Her dad? No.
Her friends.
She wanted her friends. A friend, as we've talked about, but they've got to know about it. As we talked about in the previous point, a friend is just there. He may not know what to say. He may not know what to do. And I can't expect him to have these words. Okay, that one sentence that solves all my problems. Everything's good now. No. People may not remember what you've said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And a friend is just there when you need them most. That's a realistic expectation.
That's right.
Man, brother,
Mark,
I want to hear that whole sermon there, man.
Come on down.
Mark, I couldn't help, and y'all forgive my humor. When you sat and asked the question, could you imagine your father telling you that I got to offer you because of a vow I made? I couldn't help but think about Isaac sitting on the panel listening to this, and Isaac going, I can understand.
Yeah, Isaac in the back.
Yeah, Isaac's like, I've been there.
That's a mess.
Isaac turned and looked at his dad. Sound familiar?
Abraham.
Where's the offering, the Lord? Oh, I'm not
Don't worry, son.
The Lord will make a way, right?
And what about those servants? Those servants down there like, he gonna get that boy.
We don't want it to be us, right? Man, that's messed up. One of the things I thought about too, Mark, with what everything that you stated was sometimes we can kill ourselves by trying to shoulder some of the weight that we should be willing to share with other people. And a great part of that could be, I guess you could argue that it's pride. You could argue that I don't necessarily want to, as Stephen mentioned earlier, I don't want to all of a sudden relegate myself to this smaller position, if you will, like this position of servitude to another. And I don't want to feel like I can't handle it. And so I think I've been there before. I've been there playing sports in high school. You think about a team sport like football. Well, you have to be, and I was on the defense and I played outside linebacker, and I had wonderful tackling abilities and being able to pursue and stuff like that. But then you had younger guys playing beside you and you don't trust. And I just remember, I laugh about this because I remember making a critical mistake because I didn't trust the guy beside me. And man, I left my lane, and they had one of the shiftiest running backs in the state, man. And I ran over because I didn't think that this guy would make the tackle. And so my lane is wide open. He scores a touchdown. And I bring that out to just really emphasize the point that we need other people, and we have to trust other people with the problems that we give them, with the issues that we give them. Brother, I'm hurting. Whatever resources you have available to help me, please help me. And then trust that they will help you. Don't try to solve it all yourself, because again, you could be leading yourself to an early grave. Who knows? But I wanted to touch on really quick as we prepare to end is how can, understanding now the unrealistic expectation and the realistic expectation, how can we avoid putting pressure on others to conform to our expectations and instead celebrate their unique strengths and weaknesses within a friendship?
I'll answer this. I want to kind of answer the last question too, and this one together, is I think, what should we expect in this one now? Man, there are two great, in my mind at least two. But when you think of friendships in the Bible, while they do get a bad rap, and in some aspects deservedly so, but Job's friends demonstrated a tremendous level of friendship at the front. You know, they left their home, they made a covenant together to come and be with Job. You know, Bildad, Zophar, Eliphaz, and even Elihu. It would seem to have been there the whole time too, but those guys really demonstrated some true love for him. And about friends can also push us to be the best versions of ourselves, or should also. I'm thinking about Jesus and Peter. Peter had a lot of issues, but there in John 21, he's like, look, man, go feed my sheep. Peter had, cut the man's ear off. Peter had asked to get out on water, then sink in the water. Peter had denied knowing Jesus, and Jesus like, no, I still see your potential. I'm still your friend. So you need to go out and feed my sheep. And with that, so now the second question that you're posing, we can let people be them and still be a friend. So right. Peter was always going to be kind of the true fisherman. He was always going to be that. Yep. He was never going to not be Peter. But there's a way for Peter to still be a friend to Jesus. And you and I, all of us, we'll always be who we are, but we can still be friends and accept friendship. And if we allow people to be who they are, Mark, you mentioned farming. I can't look to Ron and say, well, man, why are you not a farmer like Mark? Ron, why aren't you a personal trainer like Daniel? It is what it is. We are who we are, and we have our upbringing, but, allowing people to still maintain their personality and still be who they are and all that sort of thing in the friendship, and not just allow them. I don't want to say it like that, but celebrate it.
Amen.
It's great that we have our various things. And so I think that, letting each other really be who we are in the friendship, acknowledging that, celebrating it, absorbing it, and all that kind of thing, it will help the friendship to be rich, because that could hopefully be reciprocated where you get to be, I'm just a kid from Detroit. I don't fish and hunt. I don't churn butter. I didn't grow up on a farm.
Hey, for real.
I don't know about all that stuff.
Hey, facts.
I have
facts,
two round thumbs, like literally. I can kill any plant just like that, man. And so, that's not my orientation. And so I lived in Arkansas for 11 years, and the guys teased me about it. It was fun, but they let me be me. I'm a city boy, and I let them be country guys. Mutually accept and respect that thing. I think it kind of helps to enrich the friendship.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Absolutely. And I think we could do the same thing within our friendships, being willing to celebrate our strengths and our weaknesses. It's funny because I thought about something that Ron and I used to do in Butler. He knew my weaknesses was just getting involved in certain conversations that I thought were absolutely weird. And I still struggle there from time to time, but Ron I'll never forget Ron would say, hey, Dan, what you think about this? I'm like, man, why are you asking me to get involved in this? And why are you asking me to get involved in this? I struggle with this. So it's something like that. I believe how friends, if we allow them to be themselves, we can help sharpen each other in a way.
You
Yeah,
guys
I told him
already
to come back in.
touched on it a little bit, but I don't know how it was in your class. I graduated preaching school, 20-something years ago now. But remember that first day when you get there, I knew one other person well because we came from the same area. But then you get all these other people from all around the country. And some of them were just weird, And when I say weird, mostly because they weren't like me,
Right.
But then you go 2 years together doing the same thing, and there's only a handful of people in the whole world that know what you're going through, and it's those guys in that classroom. Well, fast forward from day one where there's a lot of weird people in there. At the end of year 2, those weird people are some of your favorites,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think about them more than I do some of the ones that I had more in common with. But when I say weird, I'm talking about not like me, maybe the opposite of me. But you start valuing where they're coming from and you realize, man, these guys, yeah, we have different interests, but the most important things we have in common, and those were the bonds. And I think about those. One of them's my best friend to this day. And, when we first started that, if I treated that like I do some of my other relationships, that person there, we've got nothing in common. I don't really value a friendship in that. If I treated my time in preaching school like I do some of my relationships, we wouldn't have been able to get that close. But that time together, coming in there every day, that gave us an opportunity to kind of talk what we're talking about right now, to build relationships in spite of differences.
I was thinking to myself as this internet here at the church building cut out, is that my friends here at the church put in 10% effort as far as getting this stuff set up. And I'm going to tell them about it. I'm not pleased. But,
See, that's exactly what
I'm going to tell them about it tomorrow. I'm like, it just all shut off. Okay, so I had to use the phone, but no, I was gonna say, answering Steven's question earlier. You asked me why I'm not a farmer, why I'm not into like Mark, and why I'm not into fitness like Daniel. And I was thinking to myself, one, I'm lazy, and number two, I am a city boy from Illinois. So absolutely not. I don't do that. You understand what I'm saying? Absolutely not. And so it's funny to even think about going from Rockford, Illinois, and finding myself in Butler, Alabama. See, Daniel's laughing because that was like changing dimensions, man. I'm telling you, and getting down there and seeing how they operate. But anyway, it is what it is. And I'm sure you all had said it, when I left the chat. One, I think what we should do is consider how we would feel if somebody asked us to conform to them.
Right.
We wouldn't like that too much, right? And then number two, I say have a realistic view of self and understand, and I think I said it earlier, understand that we're not the center of the universe. I tell the church a joke, and while it's funny, I think the principle of the joke always rings true. I say when it comes to discipleship, we're not in the business of making disciples of self. We're in the business of making disciples of Christ. And now that's not to say that, hey, listen, Ron Sanders Jr. doesn't have any redeeming qualities. But I can be honest and say the church doesn't need more Ron Sanders. As a matter of fact, if the entire church was Ron Sanders, that would get kind of annoying. It'd be boring. It would cease to be unique. And so then the uniqueness and part of the beauty of the body comes from our different, skill sets and our different, perspectives and our different walks of life. And so, I'm sure it was said, like I said, when I left the chat, just learning to embrace that and accept that and appreciate that. Yes, being from Rockford, Illinois, I tell you what, going to a place like Butler, Alabama, where the people are they're different. There's still certain commonality there, right? But I tell people about Choctaw County, about the people that live in that particular county, salt of the earth. Some of the best and most genuine people that I've ever met in my life, that have enriched my life, that have blessed my life. Whoever would have thought were from this rural county in Alabama?
No, say it how you used to say it. Say it, backwoods, black hole.
Backwoods, black. Look, where Daniel was living, y'all, there were no street lights, nothing in the back. So Imagine being in a rural country area, and then this rural country area has the nerve to have a suburb where it's just pitch black at night. What kind of sense does that make? He laughing because you know what I'm talking about. It's called I'm well or something like that. We just drive back here with no lights. It's dangerous back here.
He said, what is this black hole, no street lights, gravel road? You walk outside at night to conversate with the deer and the coons and all this.
But like I said, listen, met some of the best people that I've ever met. I've learned some new language too. I never knew what a sapsucker was. Dan, you gotta say that for everybody.
We used to say sapsucker to describe everything. Like, look at that sapsucker.
Dan, you want to hear something funny about that? So my godfather is from Alabama. He's from the Athens area. So I was telling him about that not too long ago when he was up there. And you know what he said to me? He said, oh, I know what a sapsucker is. I said, what? What is that? He said something like it's a bird or something like that. And I just looked at him and I said, so, and I've been teasing this man the whole time, saying, accusing him of just making up something. He goes, oh no, I know exactly what that means. But I suppose it would have been the same if, somebody from Choctaw County came up to Rockford, heard our lingo, saw how we did things. Mm-hmm. It felt like they were in another dimension.
But that's the uniqueness that we're celebrating,
that's right?
Like that's the beauty of it, in my opinion. And
that's
before
right.
we end, y'all, I just wanted to switch gears really quick to speak and address our brothers who might consider or classify themselves as introverts. And of course, I think now you have a new dimension that maybe perhaps didn't exist some 20 plus years ago, but now you have, instead of introvert, extrovert, you have introverted extroversion. And so where people are starting to combine the two. But I just wanted us to speak to that a little bit. How can we make friends if we classify or if we are introverted? And is it possible to do so without feeling overwhelmed?
Yes, it's possible to make friends. It could be a slower process. The one thing that I would say is be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Believe it or not, like my core personality is more introverted than extroverted. A lot of people don't believe that, but it's true. I have a more shy, natural core demeanor than I present most of the times. And that's just over time because of my career in sales and career in preaching. I couldn't afford to, resort to that. And so going out of that is uncomfortable. And it still is to a degree sometimes uncomfortable. But I've become comfortable with that feeling now. So I already know what's coming and I already know how to kind of channel it. So sometimes I have to coach myself into certain conversations. I walk into a room and I see people conversing. And on the one hand, I want to be in the conversation because I know the people, I love the people. But then there's a certain nervousness or anxiety. But I'm just like, just get through it and then you'll be in it, door knocking, evangelism, door knocking, I get nervous. There's a lot of different things that make me feel uncomfortable. But if you're more interested in the goal, then you can find yourself getting over it. So just kind of in a nutshell, be comfortable with being uncomfortable and look at the goal instead of the obstacle of the anxiety that may be associated with that initial introduction, the initial phone call or whatever it may be.
Well, I was going to just say a couple of things that Stephen said. This one, just take it for what it's worth because it's not always possible. My wife would call herself an introvert. She's one of the funniest people in the world, but most people will never know it. She'll say something to me and then I'll repeat it and everybody will laugh at my joke. And she's a woman. One of the things I appreciate about her, you get her with places where she's comfortable and then she'll open up. But it almost takes an extrovert, to help facilitate that. So her best friends are extroverts. And so what I would say is introverts, look for an extrovert. And I know that's not the first thing that we look for in friendships, but that's just a generic thing. Look for an extrovert that, my wife would rather listen than talk. I would rather talk than listen. And so we work out perfectly, and with her friends, that she has that are extroverts, she'll open up with them. They help her, and so that's what we're talking about here. Look for somebody who's not just like you, but sometimes your best friends will be the exact opposite of you.
Right.
And so if you're an introvert, and again, I'm not saying this is the first place we look for in a friend, but look for an extrovert. And you'll be surprised perhaps just how similar you guys are.
You both said everything that I was going to say, and that's what happens when you get on a chat with preachers. So just, restating what was just said. Yeah, of course, the answer is yes. If you understand what an introvert is, what makes them that way and what makes them comfortable. And so as Stephen said, be comfortable being a little bit uncomfortable. But I'll add what I said from the previous response, just kind of take yourself, out of the center of that equation and focus on forging that genuine relationship. Try to do things that are going to make them comfortable. Sometimes introverts prefer isolation as opposed to socialization, right? And then after, having certain social interactions, they can feel, overwhelmed themselves and need to, retreat. And so when I'm dealing with a person who is an introvert, I go into that knowing, okay, well, number one, they're not going to be great conversation starters. So I think about some questions that I can ask them, and I try to make sure that those questions are open-ended questions. So it's just not, yep, nope, yep, nope. Okay, this is awkward.
Or not too intrusive either. What's your social security number?
What's your social? Yes, bank account number, routing number. Yes, got it. Okay, I've got everything I need. So
look, that's the end of that friendship.
But yeah, but when you understand that about an introvert, I think that, Daniel, that takes away the overwhelming, aspect of that whole situation. And really, you've always wondered, you've always said, Daniel, Ron, you've got this unique talent. You can find the most awkward person in the room, and you will get that person to talk. It's not a superpower, man. That's what I try to do. All right, you can recognize it right off. All right, I can see this person not really talkative. Find a way, find some common ground, break the ice. You know what I'm saying? Ask some open-ended questions, of course, that are not too intrusive, and get that person talking. And then a lot of times what happens is that person will start being a little bit more comfortable, and then interactions after that, and then the interactions to follow, they're a little bit better. So again, yes, you can, form a friendship with an introvert without feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I think hence the name of the podcast, right? Forging Brotherhood. That's the idea. It's a process. It's going to take every little interaction is significant, and I think we can begin to build ground of just simply, you start off saying hey, and then that hey becomes hey, how you doing, and then that how you doing becomes so on and so forth. So you're looking at the incremental growth within the conversation itself. And Mark, you touched on something. That's why I was laughing so hard, because when you and your wife came up here, and Mark just outright said, he said Mindy's a little bit of an introvert. And boy, we went to Dallas, and Mindy even before that, she just talking, and she got my wife to talk and talk. I was like, man, this is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And so you think about that. I appreciate my wife's introversion, because I wouldn't classify myself as an extrovert, but more of an introverted extrovert. She teaches me at times when I need to just be quiet.
Yeah.
And then vice versa.
Yeah.
I teach her at times.
Yeah.
I teach her at times. Sometimes I'm like, all right, baby, it's time for you to speak this time. Now, you've been quiet long enough.
Sometimes she'll just put her hand on my arm. It's like,
hey, Mark, I get the tap on the hand.
Be quiet.
Isn't that a wonderful wife? But on the serious note, that's a wonderful wife, man, that knows her husband enough.
Yeah.
But won't shame you, embarrass you in front of people, but, just
Right.
kind of the loving rub on the arm, with a tap, with a pat on the back, something. My wife's the same way. She's real quiet, and I'll talk more, and then sometimes she'll just kind of give me the look, or, okay, honey, it's like, gotcha.
Look, it happens every Sunday, man. I am a huge talker after church. I'm trying to get it, because, you're probably not going to see some of the people anymore the rest of the week. So I'm trying to, talk
Right.
and get to everybody. And Kia just walk outside with the kids to the car.
Yeah. See outside.
Hey, good for her. Good for her.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's helpful. It's helpful for sure. But look, y'all, man, thank you so much for the conversation. The conversation has been great. Just figuring out what to, expectations within friendships, and just understanding too that we don't want our friends to be like us, but we want them to bring their unique strengths and weaknesses to the relationship, so that we can celebrate each other's uniqueness and diversity and all of those things. So I think the church, like Ron stated, it wouldn't be so fun if you had a bunch of Daniels everywhere. And I'm sure we all can say the same thing. So men, brothers, if you have questions, as always, please leave those in the comment section. You can email forgingbrotherhood@outlook.com. And of course, as always, we'll be sure to get back to those within the next episode. If not, we'll answer them directly on the chat. Until next time, keep forging brotherhood.